Please, the little girl whispered through the rain, holding the soaked hospital paper with both trembling hands. My mom said if anything happened, I had to bring this to you. Nathaniel Hale barely glanced at the paper at first. Then his face changed. The color drained from it so suddenly that even the security guard stopped moving. The billionaire's fingers tightened around the wet page, because written across the top under emergency cardiac unit was a name he had not seen in 12 years. Earlier that night, the mansion had been silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock near the west hallway. Nathaniel Hale sat alone in the back kitchen instead of the formal dining room, eating reheated tomato soup from a white porcelain bowl while rain hammered against the tall windows overlooking the property. The mansion was warm, spotless, glowing gold beneath imported chandeliers, but none of it felt lived in anymore. His phone buzzed once beside his elbow. Another ignored message from the board. Another problem requiring his signature by morning. He muted it without reading. Near the sink sat a half-empty glass of bourbon he had poured 2 hours earlier and never touched again. Then the security alert chimed. One sharp tone. Motion detected at the front gate. Nathaniel frowned slightly and looked toward the wall monitor above the counter. At first all he saw was rain. Heavy sheets of it blowing sideways beneath the porch lights. Then the camera adjusted focus. A child stood outside the gate. Small. Motionless. Water streamed from the hood of her sweatshirt. One thin arm wrapped around a faded backpack while the other reached toward the intercom button again. Sir? The guard's voice crackled through the speaker near the monitor. There's a girl out here. Nathaniel checked the time. 11:47 p.m. A girl. Looks about 9 or 10. The guard hesitated. She says she needs somewhere to stay until the storm passes. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. In his world, strangers rarely arrived without wanting something. Money, tension, access. Lawsuits had started with less. Call someone, he said flatly. Shelter. Services. Non-emergency. Already tried. Weather's got half the roads flooded. Another pause. You want me to send her away? Nathaniel looked back at the screen. The little girl had not moved. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her braids. Her sneakers were soaked dark, almost black from standing in pooled water. What caught his attention wasn't desperation. It was the way she stood. Quiet, controlled, like someone trying very hard not to ask for too much. Before he could answer, another figure entered the frame behind him. Edgar Lowell, the mansion's longtime estate manager, had apparently heard the commotion from the foyer. Absolutely not, Edgar said immediately. You can't let random people near the property at this hour. Nathaniel stood and grabbed the dish towel beside the sink almost absently. It's a child. Children are used for scams all the time. Edgar's expression hardened. Especially around estates like this. Nathaniel said nothing. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. The girl pressed the intercom button one last time. Her voice came through distorted beneath the rain. I'm not asking for money, she said softly. Just until the rain stops. Edgar reached toward the control panel. I'm shutting the gate. But before the metal latch clicked, the girl quickly pulled something from her backpack and pushed it through the narrow opening beneath the bars. A single sheet of paper, soaked nearly transparent from the storm. The security guard picked it up uncertainly and carried it inside moments later. Nathaniel took the paper with one hand while still holding the kitchen towel in the other. Hospital intake form. Emergency cardiac admission. Water stains blurred most of the ink. But one line remained painfully readable. Patient name, Monica Brooks. Nathaniel stopped breathing for a second. The dish towel slipped from his hand onto the marble floor. And near the bottom corner of the paper, half hidden beneath rainwater and a hospital stamp, someone had written 5 words in shaky blue ink. He still doesn't know the truth. Nathaniel stared at the words for so long that the rain outside almost disappeared beneath the sound of his own breathing. Monica Brooks. The name sat on the page like something dragged up from deep water after years underground. Edgar stepped closer immediately. Sir, give me that. Nathaniel folded the paper once instead. Calmly, too calmly. How old is the girl? He asked without looking up. Maybe 9, the guard answered through the speaker. She's freezing out here. Edgar's jaw tightened. And that's unfortunate, but it changes nothing. We don't know who sent her. Nathaniel finally lifted his eyes toward the security monitor again. The girl still stood there in the rain with the same strange patience. Not pounding the gate, not crying, just waiting. Water dripped from the edge of her sleeves onto the stone path below her shoes. Nathaniel pressed the gate release button before he fully realized he'd moved his hand. Edgar looked stunned. Nathaniel, she's a child, and children can carry messages for adults. Then let's hear the message. A loud metallic buzz echoed through the property as the front gate unlocked. A minute later the front doors opened, and cold rain air swept through the marble foyer. The girl stepped inside carefully, almost cautiously, clutching the faded backpack against her chest. Up close, she looked even smaller than she had on camera. Her hoodie was too thin for November weather. One shoelace had snapped and been tied back together in a knot. Mud clung to the hem of her jeans. Edgar immediately placed folded towels on the floor with visible irritation. Stand there, he instructed sharply. Don't walk across the rugs. The girl nodded once without arguing. Then, very quietly, she slipped off her wet sneakers and lined them neatly beside the door before stepping onto the towels in mismatched socks. Nathaniel noticed that before anything else. Most frightened children either clung or panicked. This one seemed determined not to owe anyone more trouble than necessary. What's your name? He asked. Ava Brooks. The last name landed differently this time. Ava's eyes moved briefly around the enormous foyer. Crystal chandelier. Grand staircase. Black and white marble floors polished so perfectly they reflected light like water. But there was no awe in her expression. Only exhaustion. Edgar folded his arms. Who told you to come here? Ava looked at Nathaniel when she answered. My mom. Monica Brooks? She nodded once. Where is she now? St. Vincent's. Her fingers tightened slightly around the backpack strap. 3rd floor cardiac unit. Nathaniel unfolded the wet hospital paper again. Something bothered him now beyond the name itself. He looked closer at the timestamp printed beside emergency admission. 8:14 p.m. Then his eyes shifted lower toward another line nearly blurred away by rainwater. Employer insurance contacted. Hale Steel Industrial Benefits Division. Denied. Nathaniel's expression changed almost invisibly. Hale Steel had sold that division 8 years ago. Edgar noticed the silence first. Sir. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. Instead he asked Ava softly, why would the hospital contact Hale Steel? Ava swallowed before answering. Because my mom worked there. Edgar let out a short breath. Thousands of people worked there. But Ava shook her head. Not like this. Nathaniel watched her carefully now. What does that mean? Ava hesitated. For the first time since entering the house, something like fear flickered across her face. Not fear for herself. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Then she reached slowly into the front pocket of her backpack and pulled out a plastic hospital bracelet. It had already been cut off someone's wrist. Rainwater still clung to it in tiny droplets beneath the foyer lights. Nathaniel took it carefully. Patient, Monica Brooks. Room 312. Beneath that was another line handwritten in black marker instead of printed ink. Transfer approved. 11:30 p.m. Nathaniel checked the grandfather clock behind him instinctively. 11:58. Ava looked up at him and spoke so quietly it barely sounded like a child anymore. My mom said if they moved her tonight, she whispered. I wasn't supposed to let anybody from your company find us first. Nobody from my company? Nathaniel repeated, but his voice stayed low, almost careful, as if the wrong tone might make the child take one step back into the storm. Ava nodded, still holding the cut hospital bracelet between her small fingers until he gently took it from her. Edgar shifted behind them. This is getting theatrical, he said, but something in his voice had changed. It was still polished, still controlled, but thinner now, like a man trying not to look at a crack in the wall. Nathaniel heard it. He said nothing. He only turned the bracelet under the foyer light and studied the handwriting again. Transfer approved. 11:30 p.m. Not printed. Not stamped. Written by hand. Who wrote this? He asked. Ava looked down at her socks on the folded towel. One was pink. One was gray. Both had holes near the toes. A nurse didn't, she said. Edgar's eyes narrowed. How would you know that? Ava lifted her chin just a little. Because nurses write fast. This man wrote slow. The foyer went quiet. Outside, rain rattled against the glass panels beside the front door, hard and steady. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, a dryer turned on with a soft mechanical hum, shaking warmth through the walls. It should have been a comforting sound. Instead, it made the silence around Ava feel colder. Nathaniel moved toward the small table near the staircase and set the bracelet beside the wet hospital paper. What man? Ava swallowed. The one with the brown coat. Edgar stepped forward. Children misremember things all the time. Ava did not look at him. She looked only at Nathaniel. He smelled like peppermint gum, she said, and his phone kept buzzing. He answered once outside my mom's room and said, "She still has the girl." Then he looked at me through the glass. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Barely. What time was this? After the lady with the coffee came. What lady? She had 2 cups. Ava reached into her backpack again. Slower this time, as if every item inside had to be protected from the room itself. She pulled out a crumpled coffee receipt, damp at one corner but still readable. St. Vincent's Lobby Cafe. 2 large coffees. 10:42 p.m. paid by card. The name printed at the bottom was V. Lang. Nathaniel stared at the receipt. He didn't blink. Edgar's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, just slightly, as if to check his phone, then stopped when Nathaniel's eyes shifted to him. Victor Lang was at the hospital tonight, Nathaniel asked. Edgar gave a small, practiced frown. Mr. Lang handles delicate corporate matters. It wouldn't be unusual for him to visit if the hospital contacted the benefits division. At 10:42 p.m.? Emergencies don't keep office hours. The answer was smooth. Too smooth. Ava's fingers curled around the strap of her backpack. He told my mom she should have stayed gone, she said. Nathaniel looked back at her, and for the first time, the room seemed to tilt slightly around him. You heard that? Ava nodded. He thought I was asleep in the chair. I wasn't. Edgar exhaled through his nose, annoyed now. Sir, this is exactly why we should not entertain frightened children with overheard scraps of conversation. Ava turned to him then. Not angry, not loud, just steady. I'm frightened, she said, but I'm not lying. The words landed harder than if she had shouted. Nathaniel picked up the wet paper again, then the receipt, then the bracelet. 3 small things. A hospital form, a coffee receipt, a child's memory of peppermint gum. None of them proved enough. Together, they made something he did not want to name. He walked to the wall monitor and pressed the security archive. Pull the gate footage from 11:30, he told Edgar. Edgar did not move. Nathaniel turned slowly. Now. Edgar crossed to the panel, typed in the estate code, and the screen filled with a frozen image of the rain-soaked driveway. Nathaniel watched the timestamp climb. 11:27, 11:28, 11:29. Then the picture flickered. Static. Black. When the footage returned, the clock read 11:36, and Ava was already standing at the gate with the hospital paper in her hand. The security screen remained frozen for another second before Edgar calmly reached forward and exited the playback window altogether. Storm interference, he said smoothly. It happens during heavy electrical activity. Nathaniel kept watching the black monitor. 6 minutes. Edgar gave the slightest shrug. These systems are designed to protect the estate, not survive lightning strikes. The answer sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Ava stood silently near the staircase, still barefoot on the folded towels. Rainwater had dried in uneven patches across her sweatshirt, leaving darker stains at the shoulders and cuffs. She looked painfully out of place beneath the chandelier light, like someone accidentally left inside a museum after closing time. Edgar turned toward her with the kind of practiced patience wealthy people often mistook for kindness. "Ava," he said gently, "you've had a frightening night. Nobody is saying your mother isn't sick. But grown-up situations can become confusing very quickly, especially in hospitals." Ava tightened her grip on the backpack strap. "I know what I heard. I'm sure you believe that." Nathaniel's eyes shifted slightly toward Edgar at those words. Believe that, not remember that. A small distinction, but it lodged somewhere uncomfortable in his chest. Edgar continued in the same calm voice. "Mr. Hale's company employs thousands of people. Lawyers visit hospitals. Benefits departments make mistakes. It does not automatically mean there's some conspiracy against your mother." Ava said nothing. Edgar stepped closer to Nathaniel instead, lowering his voice just enough to sound discreet while still allowing Ava to hear every word. "Sir, if this reaches the press before facts are verified, it could become ugly very fast. A child at your gate in the middle of the night claiming corporate misconduct." He glanced briefly toward the wet hospital form still lying on the table. "People build lawsuits around less." Nathaniel's jaw shifted once. Not anger, thought. Somewhere upstairs, pipes groaned softly as the old mansion heating system pushed warm air through the walls. In the kitchen beyond the hallway, the forgotten bowl of soup still sat untouched beneath the lights. Everything around them looked stable, wealthy, controlled. But the little girl standing barefoot on towels in the middle of the foyer made the entire house feel suddenly uncertain. Edgar turned back toward Ava again. "You should let us contact social services tonight." Ava's eyes flickered once toward the front doors. Not fear of leaving, fear of something else. "No, why not?" She hesitated. "Because they'll know where I am." Edgar folded his hands. "Who will?" Ava looked at Nathaniel before answering. "The people from the hospital." Edgar gave a soft exhale through his nose, almost amused now. "Ava, hospitals do not hunt children. This one did." The room went still again. Nathaniel noticed then that Ava had not once asked for food, dry clothes, or a bed. Every answer circled back to one thing only: keeping distance between her mother and someone else. Edgar checked his watch. "Sir, with respect, this has gone far enough for tonight." Nathaniel finally spoke. "Call Victor Lang." Edgar paused almost invisibly. "At midnight. Now." Edgar pulled out his phone, but for the first time that evening, Nathaniel saw something tiny slip beneath the polished composure. Not panic. Calculation. Edgar stepped several feet away near the library entrance before making the call. His voice dropped low enough to blur beneath the rain outside. Ava's eyes followed him immediately. Nathaniel noticed that too. "What?" he asked quietly. Ava didn't answer at first. She just stared toward Edgar's turned back. Then she whispered. He changed his voice. Nathaniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "When he talks to you, he sounds different." She looked down at the hospital bracelet still resting near Nathaniel's hand. "That's the same thing the man at the hospital did before my mom stopped talking." Edgar ended the call and slipped the phone back into his coat pocket with perfect calm. "Mr. Lang is awake," he announced. "He says there's no record of any Monica Brooks ever filing a workplace complaint against Hale Steele." Ava's fingers slowly tightened around her backpack strap. Then, very quietly, she said, "That's strange." Edgar looked at her. "What is?" Ava tilted her head slightly. "Because my mom never filed a complaint." A small silence followed. "She signed a confidentiality agreement." Ava's words seemed to settle into the mansion walls long after she stopped speaking. Edgar's expression barely changed, but Nathaniel saw the tiny pause before the man answered. "Then perhaps your mother signed something else," Edgar said lightly. "People misremember legal details all the time." Ava shook her head immediately. "My mom remembers paper better than people." Edgar smiled politely, though it did not reach his eyes. "That's an unusual sentence for a child." My mom says papers are how rich people make things disappear. Nathaniel looked at her then. Really looked. The girl was exhausted, soaked, probably hungry. Yet every answer she gave circled carefully around specifics. Dates, names, exact words. Not once had she exaggerated. That bothered him more than panic would have. Edgar glanced toward the grandfather clock. It's almost midnight, sir. Mr. Lang is driving over personally to clear this up. Personally. Another small thing. Another unnecessary detail. Nathaniel noticed Ava notice it too. Her shoulders stiffened just slightly beneath the oversized sweatshirt. Somewhere down the west corridor, the television in the security office murmured low through static. A late-night weather anchor talked about flooded roads and fallen power lines across Fairfield County. The normalness of the sound made the foyer feel stranger. Nathaniel picked up the hospital bracelet again. Ava, he said carefully, did your mother give you anything else? Edgar answered before she could. Sir, surely this can wait until morning. Nathaniel did not look away from the girl. Did she? Ava hesitated longer this time. Not fear exactly. Calculation. Like a child deciding whether an adult had earned the next truth. Then she slowly knelt beside her backpack and unzipped the smallest front pocket. From inside, she pulled out an old flip phone wrapped tightly in a plastic sandwich bag. The phone itself looked at least 15 years old. Scratched silver casing. Tiny cracked screen. Battery taped in place with clear tape yellowed from age. Ava held it close instead of handing it over immediately. My mom said if anybody tried to take this before I gave it to you, she whispered, I should break it first. Edgar's eyes sharpened instantly. Too quickly. Nathaniel caught that. What's on it? He asked. I don't know. Ava looked down at the phone. She never let me open it. Nathaniel extended his hand slowly. After a moment, Ava placed the phone into his palm with visible reluctance. Felt lighter than he expected. Almost fragile. He pressed the side button once. Dead battery. But when he turned it over, something on the back made his chest tighten unexpectedly. A faded rectangular sticker peeled at the corners. Hale Steel South Plant Access. Employee Emergency Device. Nathaniel had not seen one in years. Only floor supervisors and emergency response staff carried those phones during the final years before the plant shut down. Where did your mother get this? Ava answered softly. It belonged to somebody who died. The words hung in the foyer like cold breath. Edgar stepped forward at once. Sir, that phone could belong to anyone. Those devices were discarded after the closure. Nathaniel barely heard him, because another detail had already caught his attention. A tiny notification light blinking weakly near the hinge. Not dead. Waiting. Nathaniel pressed a button again. The dim screen flickered alive for half a second before collapsing back into darkness. But in that brief glow, he saw something. One saved voicemail. One unheard message. Timestamp. October 14th, 12:07 a.m. The date hit him instantly. October 14th. The night of the fire. Nathaniel's thumb froze over the keypad. That's impossible, Edgar said too fast. Silence followed. Nathaniel slowly lifted his eyes toward him. Edgar recovered immediately, smoothing his expression back into calm professionalism. I only mean, he said carefully, those systems were wiped after the investigation. Nathaniel looked back down at the phone in his hand, at the blinking light that should not still exist after 12 years. Then he remembered something small, something he had not thought about in over a decade. Victor Lang had supervised the evidence purge himself after the fire because, in his exact words, sensitive company materials could not risk public exposure. Nathaniel stared at the old phone a second longer. Then, very quietly, he asked the question he had never once thought to ask before. What exactly was Victor trying so hard to erase? Nathaniel did not answer Edgar's question. He only closed the flip phone carefully, as though the small plastic device might break apart if handled too roughly. The blinking notification light disappeared beneath his palm. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Rain moved softly against the tall foyer windows now, less violent than before, just a steady hiss across the glass. Somewhere in the kitchen, ice shifted inside the untouched bourbon glass with a quiet crack. Nathaniel finally looked at Ava. Did your mother ever listen to the voicemail? Ava shook her head. She said it scared her. Then why keep it? Ava's eyes lowered toward the old phone in his hand. Because dead people don't usually leave messages after midnight. Edgar let out a controlled breath through his nose. Sir, this is becoming dangerously speculative. Nathaniel ignored him completely. Instead, he turned and walked toward the study off the west hallway. Stay here, he told Ava quietly. She nodded once and remained near the staircase, still holding her backpack against her chest. Edgar followed Nathaniel immediately. You cannot seriously be entertaining this. Nathaniel entered the dark study without responding. He switched on only the desk lamp, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. Shelves of legal volumes and framed business awards lined the walls. On the desk sat decades of carefully controlled success. Quarterly reports, signed acquisitions, contracts worth more than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. Nathaniel opened the bottom drawer and removed another phone entirely. Older, private, a number almost nobody had. Edgar stopped just inside the doorway. Who are you calling? Someone I trust. Edgar's expression changed almost invisibly at that word. Nathaniel dialed from memory. The line rang twice before a sleepy female voice answered. Anna Keller. Anna, it's Nathaniel. Silence. Then immediate alertness. Anna Keller had once been Hale Steel's internal compliance investigator before resigning abruptly 11 years earlier. Nathaniel, she said carefully, do you know what time it is? I need access to archived personnel files from South Plant. Another silence. Longer this time. Why? Nathaniel looked down at the old flip phone on the desk. Because I think someone lied to me about the fire. He heard Anna sit up on the other end. Who? Nathaniel's eyes drifted toward the doorway where Edgar still stood. I'm not ready to say yet. Edgar folded his arms. Sir, this is exactly how confusion turns into liability. Nathaniel muted the phone briefly. How many people had authority to erase emergency evidence after the fire? Edgar answered too quickly. Victor handled all legal containment. Containment, not investigation, not support. Nathaniel noticed the word immediately. He unmuted the call. Anna, he said quietly, I need every sealed file connected to Monica Brooks. Anna inhaled sharply. Monica. Her voice dropped lower. Nathaniel. Where did you hear that name? Before he could answer, movement caught his attention through the partially open study door. Ava had quietly crossed the foyer and now stood near the kitchen entrance. Edgar noticed her too. Ava, he said with thin patience. Mr. Hale is handling adult matters. Ava looked at Nathaniel instead. Can I ask something? Nathaniel nodded once. If my mom was lying, she said softly, why did somebody keep trying to make her stop talking? The question settled heavily into the room. Edgar looked away first. Nathaniel saw that too. Ava reached into her backpack again, but this time she only pulled out a folded peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, slightly crushed, probably hours old. The nurse gave me two, she explained quietly. I saved one for my mom in case she wakes up hungry. Nathaniel stared at the sandwich longer than he should have. The child had arrived soaked, exhausted, hunted by something she barely understood, and still her first instinct was to save food for someone else. Not once had she asked him for anything except shelter from the rain. Anna's voice crackled softly through the phone speaker. Nathaniel, she said carefully, there's something else you need to know about Monica Brooks. He picked the phone back up slowly. What? Another pause. She didn't disappear after the fire. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. Anna lowered her voice further. Victor Lang personally ordered her removed from the employee survivor list before the bodies were even identified. Nathaniel did not move for several seconds after Anna ended the call. The study felt smaller now, tighter somehow, as though the walls themselves had begun listening. Rain traced slow lines down the dark windows behind his desk. Edgar remained near the doorway with the controlled posture of a man trying very hard not to appear nervous. In the foyer beyond, the grandfather clock struck midnight. Ava sat quietly on the edge of a leather bench now, her damp backpack resting beside her feet. The folded sandwich still sat untouched in her lap. Nathaniel looked at Edgar at last. "How long have you known Victor?" Edgar answered immediately. 15 years. "And before that?" "I worked estate management in Boston." Calm, smooth, practiced. Nathaniel nodded once, then reached for the old flip phone again. "You said those devices were wiped after the fire." "They were. Completely. That was my understanding." Nathaniel turned the phone slowly in his hand. "Then why does this one still have a voicemail indicator?" Edgar's expression held steady, but his eyes shifted downward for the briefest moment. Not toward Nathaniel, toward the phone itself. Ava noticed it instantly. Nathaniel noticed Ava noticing it. Nobody spoke for a second. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator compressor clicked on with a low mechanical hum. Then Nathaniel stood. "We're going to test something." Edgar frowned slightly. "Test what?" Nathaniel walked past him into the foyer. "Memory." He crossed to the security console mounted beside the staircase and inserted a small encrypted archive drive from his pocket. Ava watched silently as loading bars appeared across the monitor. Estate backup systems. Private copies. Ones Edgar did not control. Edgar's voice remained polite, but something brittle had entered it now. "Sir, surely this can wait until morning." Nathaniel ignored him. "Ava," he said calmly, "when Victor visited your mother tonight, which side of the room did he stand on?" Ava answered without hesitation. "Near the window." "How do you remember?" "Because he kept looking at his reflection instead of my mom." Edgar folded his hands tighter behind his back. The archive finished loading with a soft chime. Nathaniel pulled up an old internal file labeled South Plant, October 14th Incident Review. Hundreds of documents appeared. Maintenance reports, emergency response logs, legal summaries. Then Nathaniel typed one word into the search bar. Brooks. 3 results appeared instantly. Edgar went completely still. Nathaniel clicked the first file. Employee status. Monica Brooks. Deceased pending verification. The second. Survivor compensation review. Denied. The third file, however, would not open. Access restricted by executive legal authority. Victor Lang. Nathaniel leaned back slightly in the chair. Interesting. Edgar spoke carefully. Sensitive litigation files were restricted after the settlement. There was no settlement, Ava said quietly from behind them. Edgar looked at her. Excuse me? Ava stood slowly. My mom said if there had been a settlement, we wouldn't have lost our apartment. The room fell silent again. Nathaniel opened another archived record. Security evacuation map. Floor exits. Lock override systems. Most of it meant nothing to Ava, but suddenly she stepped closer to the screen. That's wrong. Nathaniel looked at her. What is? Ava pointed at one small square near the southeast stairwell. That door opens outward. Nathaniel frowned. What? My mom showed me pictures. Ava moved closer, staring hard at the blueprint. But this says it opened inward. Edgar immediately answered. A child cannot interpret industrial schematics. Ava didn't even look at him. If a door opens inward during a fire, she said softly, people get trapped when crowds push against it. Nathaniel felt something cold move slowly through his chest. He zoomed in on the document footer. Revision date, October 16th, 2 days after the fire. Modified by Victor Lang Legal Review Division. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from the soft ticking of the grandfather clock and the rain against the glass. Then Nathaniel asked the question very quietly. Why would a lawyer alter an evacuation map after the accident already happened? Edgar's hand tightened near his wristwatch. Tiny, almost invisible. But Ava saw it. She looked straight at him for the first time in several minutes and said, because somebody needed the door to look different after people died. Edgar's face did not collapse. He was too trained for that. But for the first time all night, he stopped correcting her. And Nathaniel finally understood something far more dangerous than the missing footage or the hidden voicemail. Ava Brooks was no longer the only person in the room looking directly at the truth. The room stayed silent long after Ava finished speaking. Edgar stood near the study doorway without moving, his face composed but drained of warmth now, like a man carefully holding a mask in place with both hands. Nathaniel looked back at the modified evacuation map on the screen. October 16th, 2 days after the fire, revised by Victor Lang. His eyes lingered on the altered stairwell diagram, then shifted slowly toward the old flip phone still resting beside the keyboard. The tiny voicemail notification blinked again. One unheard message. 12 years old. Nathaniel reached for the charging cable on his desk without saying a word. Edgar stepped forward immediately. "Sir, that device could be corrupted." Nathaniel plugged it in anyway. "Maybe. You should let IT examine it first." Nathaniel finally looked up. "Why?" Edgar opened his mouth, but nothing came out for half a second. Too long. Nathaniel saw it. Ava saw it too. The old phone vibrated weakly against the desk as power crawled back into the battery. A loading screen flickered alive. Outside, the rain had nearly stopped, leaving only water dripping from the gutters beyond the dark windows. Somewhere upstairs, pipes clicked softly inside the mansion walls. Ordinary sounds. Small sounds. The kind people stopped hearing inside expensive homes. Then the voicemail icon opened. Duration, 1:12. Timestamp, October 14th, 12:07 a.m. Nathaniel pressed play. At first, there was only static and distant alarms. Then heavy breathing, running footsteps, a man coughing hard somewhere near the phone. Nathaniel recognized the voice instantly. Elliot. Younger. Panicked. Alive. Nate. Static swallowed half the sentence. The doors, they locked the south exit. More coughing. Metal clanging in the background. Then another voice entered faintly. A woman. Move. Monica Brooks. Nathaniel froze completely. He had never heard her voice before. There are still people upstairs. Elliot coughed violently. Victor said containment first. A loud crash cut through the recording. Then Monica again, closer now, terrified but furious. You tell Hale Steele if I die in here, it's because they locked us in. The line crackled. Footsteps. Screaming somewhere distant. Elliot's voice came back weaker this time. Monica came back for me? Static swallowed the rest. Then one final sound entered the recording. Calm. Male. Close to the phone.
Victor Lang.
Leave the injured, he said sharply. Seal the floor before the media arrives. The voicemail ended. Nobody moved. Nathaniel stared at the dark phone screen as though his mind had stopped translating what he just heard. His brother's voice. Monica Brooks risking her life to save him. Victor ordering exits sealed while people were still trapped inside. Edgar lowered his eyes first. Nathaniel noticed that too. You knew, Nathaniel said quietly. Edgar swallowed once. Sir, you knew. Not louder. Worse. Nathaniel slowly sat down in the leather chair behind the desk as if his legs no longer fully belonged to him. For 12 years, he had carried one version of the fire inside his head. Elliot dead because chaos broke evacuation order. Monica Brooks blamed for violating procedure. Victor Lang protecting the company afterward. Clean. Simple. Managed. And now, inside 72 seconds of damaged audio, the entire story had collapsed. Ava stood silently near the desk, clutching the straps of her backpack. She did not look triumphant, only tired. Nathaniel finally looked at her. Your mother kept this all these years? Ava nodded once. She said nobody important ever wanted to hear it. The sentence hit harder than the recording itself. Nathaniel lowered his gaze. Because she was right. He remembered every award, every interview, every speech about leadership and rebuilding Hale Steele after tragedy. He remembered Victor standing beside him through all of it. He remembered signing legal closures he never fully read because grief had made obedience feel easier than truth. And somewhere during those years, Monica Brooks disappeared into poverty, while the company bearing his family name erased her quietly enough for him never to notice. Edgar spoke carefully into the silence. Nathaniel, Victor told us the recording was destroyed. Nathaniel lifted his eyes slowly. There it was at last. Not an accident. Not confusion. A system. People protecting people. His brother had died believing Monica tried to save him. And Nathaniel had spent 12 years honoring the wrong version of the story because the men around him decided it was more convenient. The old flip phone still rested on the desk between them all like something radioactive. Nathaniel picked it up carefully. Then he stood, walked to the center of the study, and placed it down on the glass table with deliberate calm. "Call my attorney," he said softly. "Not Victor Lang." 3 weeks later, the rain finally stopped coming every night. News vans still crowded the front entrance of Hale Steel headquarters most mornings. Their satellite dishes pointed toward the glass tower where board members now entered through side doors with lowered heads. Victor Lang resigned first. Quietly at first. Then not quietly at all after federal investigators confirmed emergency records from the South Plant fire had been altered under his authority. 2 former executives followed him out within days. Internal emails surfaced. Survivor compensation files reopened. Insurance denials reversed. By the end of the month, Hale Steel's board publicly acknowledged what the company had spent 12 years burying. Monica Brooks had not caused the fire evacuation failure. She had gone back inside to save trapped workers, including Elliot Hale. Nathaniel watched the statement air from a hospital chair beside Monica's room. He sat with his elbows on his knees and the television volume low while late afternoon sunlight stretched across the polished floor tiles. The official apology sounded polished, corporate, safe, but the line that mattered still landed hard enough to hollow out his chest. Ms. Brooks' actions on October 14th were heroic. Heroic. 12 years late. Across the room, Monica slept beneath thin hospital blankets, color slowly, returning to her face after surgery. Ava sat curled in the chair beside the bed wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt one of the nurses had given her. The old flip phone rested in her lap, now fully charged, though nobody touched it anymore unless absolutely necessary. Nathaniel had offered to replace everything for them during those first days. Clothes, phones, housing, schools. Ava thanked him politely every time and asked only one question in return. "Will my mom still have to be scared after this?" That question changed the way he handled everything afterward. Not charity. Protection. Hale Steel assigned independent legal counsel to Monica instead of company attorneys. Her medical bills disappeared completely, not through quiet payoff agreements, but through publicly documented restitution funds approved by the board. Nathaniel personally restored her employment record and survivor benefits under her own name. Not anonymous. Not sealed. Her name returned to the system exactly where it should have been all along. Edgar Lowell no longer worked at the estate either. Nathaniel never publicly accused him of direct involvement, but the man resigned the morning after the voicemail became evidence. Nathaniel remembered the look on Edgar's face as security escorted Victor Lang from corporate headquarters 2 days later. Not outrage. Relief. As though the weight of years had finally become too heavy to carry quietly anymore. One evening near the end of Monica's recovery, Nathaniel drove Ava back to the mansion to collect the backpack she had left in the foyer that first stormy night. The house looked different now. Softer somehow. Warmer. The no trespassing signs near the front gate were gone. Ava noticed immediately. "You took them down." Nathaniel glanced toward the empty stone posts near the driveway. "Yeah." Ava stood quietly beside him for a moment beneath the porch lights. "Why?" Nathaniel looked out toward the dark road beyond the gates before answering. "Because I realized how many people probably saw those signs and decided not to ask for help." Ava nodded slowly as if that made perfect sense. Inside, the kitchen lights still glowed warm against the marble counters. A bowl of tomato soup simmered softly on the stove, this time untouched by loneliness or silence. Nathaniel poured Ava a full glass of milk without asking if she wanted half instead. She accepted it carefully with both hands. For a while neither of them spoke. The old grandfather clock ticked steadily somewhere deeper in the house while rainwater dripped softly from the gutters outside. Ordinary sounds. Peaceful ones. Ava looked down at the old flip phone resting beside her glass. My mom says Elliot sounded kind. Nathaniel swallowed once before answering. He was. Ava traced one finger lightly along the cracked edge of the phone. Then maybe he waited all this time because he didn't want her story to disappear too. Nathaniel looked at the child sitting quietly in his kitchen. The same little girl who had stood soaking wet outside his gates, asking only for shelter from the rain. He thought about how close he had come to letting the doors close before ever hearing her voice. Then Ava lifted the glass of milk carefully and said the one thing that finally made him lower his eyes because he could no longer trust himself to answer without emotion. My mom said rich people stop listening when life gets too quiet, she whispered. But you listened when it mattered. And for the first time since the fire took his brother, Nathaniel Hale understood that the truth had not been rescued by power, lawyers, or money. It had survived because one small girl refused to let anyone close the door before she was hurt.